Dennis, and thank you for joining us for the 7th episode of Damnation Versus. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. Woke up a bit early today to do this, but happy to be here.
I appreciate that. You are our first guest, or we've gone international. You're over in America, so as I say, thanks for waking up and doing this. Right, let's knock one thing in the head before we start. It doesn't really bother me particularly. I've never cared that this happened to you guys, but there was China. So let's knock that in the head and move on with the interview. What's the story with China, and why, when you mention Ghostbath, people bring up that you were apparently pretending to be Chinese?
Sure. Well, black metal is all about, to me, I really like the mysterious aspect of it. And that's what kind of drew me to it in the first place. One of my main influences is a band called Silencer, who has all these stories about them, all these rumors and stuff. And so when I started Ghostbath, I mean, it was never supposed to be a big project or anything that really blew up or even played live at all. And so on Bandcamp, which is where I just uploaded all my stuff, it wouldn't allow me to just put no location whatsoever. And so I was like, okay, well, I just got to pick somewhere on the other side of the world, basically.
Right.
And so it ended up being China. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. And then funny enough, we released on a Chinese label who contacted us. And so that didn't help the matters at all. And so yeah, we had Chinese characters and everything for that. And that just kind of helped with the whole mystery.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I like that aspect of it. And I like how rumors start and slowly grow. And I mean, I just read a book recently. I'm really into fantasy novels and stuff like that. And there's a book called The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Very good book. I recommend it. But the whole story is about this character talking about his past, and he has all these rumors about him, and they all sound so crazy and mysterious. And when he goes back and tells you where they actually stem from, it's something way more mundane.
Yeah.
And just over time, it just gets bigger and bigger and becomes this thing that he couldn't even control. And I feel like that's kind of what happened with the whole China thing. Yes. Where all I did was type in China. Okay, that's where we're from. I didn't even give it a second thought. And then it's just because it just blew up, and we got all these articles about us, and people contacting me. I remember Vice, the website, she emailed me. She's like, my editors don't even think you exist. Can I give you a call or whatever? And that was at a time where I was still trying to be super mysterious. I'm like, no, I can't do a phone call or anything. I don't know. And I just kind of went with it for a little bit. But I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. And it doesn't bother me.
Has there been, because it was strange to me, I only found out years later. By the time I found out about Ghostbath, he had already been to the UK and played the main stage at Bloodstock, and I understood you were an American band. But it struck me as odd when we booked you, just how many people commented on the fact that was that the band who pretended to be Chinese. Now, why I found that weird was in particular because you're in the sort of black metal bubble where a lot of people pretend a lot of things. Now, there's a band in England, Dragged Into Sunlight, who have no names, or if their names are made up names, and they wear face masks, and if they do interviews, it's all, and it's that's not an issue at all. The fact that you get other bands that are pretending they're the 7th level of hell. So I mean, I wasn't quite sure why this was such a big issue for folk. That do you feel that maybe some folk feel a wee bit as if they were duped, or they felt it was a wee bit more interesting, the idea that this style of music was coming out of China, and then when in actual fact it was North Dakota?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different aspects to it. So the journalists themselves, I think, were the ones who felt the most duped by it, because, you know, if you write an entire article on Chinese history and then the band that you wrote the article on isn't even from China, you're going to feel pretty duped. But I don't know. I always thought that was kind of funny, because there's a lot of specific people I said, don't talk about our location at all. I like told them that, and then they would just go on and write, you know, this is where China, you know, the Chinese metal scene. I'm like, okay, well, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah. Well, accidental or not, it was a bit of a master stroke by you getting that initial publicity for the band, and I hope at some point the folk that feel duped or feel that we're conned, but for some reason can get over it. But you are from North Dakota, and the reason we were kind of keen on doing this chat and me trying to slow down my accent was because we wanted to talk about the differences between the American scene and the kind of topics we tackle on here about touring and so on, as opposed to the UK scene and the European scene that I know a wee bit more about. So tell me, how's the scene? Let's start with North Dakota. Is there a metal scene in North Dakota?
I mean, it's changed over the years. It's very small. I mean, we're a small state. We only have, I want to say, 750,000 people in the entire state. We're pretty spread out. We're not very dense. We used to have a lot more venues, a lot more bands, and it would be, I'd say, like the punk and like the hardcore scene is a lot bigger here. So I used to be in sort of a post-hardcore band, and we'd play all around North Dakota. But now being in a metal band, I've played North Dakota, I think, twice. There's a festival in Fargo. Fargo is going to be the biggest city you're going to find here. And it's kind of like a college town. We've played that twice. And other than that, I mean...
What sort of size is that, the one in Fargo? What sort of capacity-wise?
Probably a couple hundred.
Right.
I think it's like upstairs in a bar, I want to say. I mean, there are like giant venues, like arena size things, but I mean, we wouldn't play something like that. So
yeah.
Other than that, it's mostly like underground. I mean, I've played like basements, I've played, you know, warehouses, people's living rooms, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But mostly like I'm very used to driving like 8 hours a day to the next show minimum, because the Midwest is so spread out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, people always, I actually live 8 hours away from the rest of the band. They all live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so just to practice or work on the new record or whatever we want to do, I get up at like probably noon, which is early for me, and then I'll just drive all day, and I'll get there at like 9 p.m. and then we'll practice or whatever. So I'm just used to it by now.
I mean, 8 hours. I mean, if you think of it in terms of Europe for driving, you can get across quite a lot of Europe in 8 hours. You know, that's that's quite remarkable. So let's talk pre-pandemic then. How is the scene, not so much in North Dakota, but in America? If Ghostbath go on tour on America, in America, what sort of venues you guys playing?
Usually it'd be like 300-400 cap venues if we're headlining. If we're supporting, I mean, we're doing like 700 to 1200 ish. We've played with like, I think the biggest tour we've been on in the US was Thy Art Is Murder and Decapitated.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was way different, and that was way different. I think like in the US, the level of band and the venues you're gonna play are like a lot different.
Yeah.
So like if you're a smaller band, you're gonna be playing way smaller venues and way different venues. But I've noticed in Europe, like whether we were headlining or we were with a way bigger band like Catatonia or something, the venues were about the same size and about the same quality.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the US, like the disparity between like, oh, I'm in a post-hardcore band with, you know, we have fans or whatever, we're playing some really shitty venue like in the middle of nowhere to like 30 people. But in Europe, it's always like a stage, you got a sound guy. I mean, it's just way more professional no matter what size you are, I've noticed.
Really? Right, because I was in Los Angeles back in 2007, and Machine Head were on the tour that they were doing with Arch Enemy and Throwdown. Now, my now wife, we went out to God knows where, a venue, and it was about 1,500 capacity. Now that tour, when it arrived in the UK, was playing arenas. And it was hard to believe that. I mean, especially Machine Head, that the expectation is usually that when the band comes from that country, they play the big shows, and then they can go to Japan and play a big show, but maybe go to Australia or Germany and play a small show. So that was a bit of a surprise for me that Machine Head were playing such small venues in America and then coming across to Scotland and playing a 10,000 capacity. Is that so? That what you're saying is that's pretty much your experience of it too. Like you can come across here and play some pretty decent venues, which might not be the case in America. And why is that? Do you think that the scene across here is spoiled a wee bit for bands, or what?
It's funny you mentioned Machine Head because they've played Minot, North Dakota, my tiny hometown of like 50,000 people, at least twice, I think, at the one venue we have here. And yeah, so I went out and saw them. But yeah, I have noticed that as well, where I think there's some level of respect in Europe and the UK for metal and just bands in general that's not held here. I mean, the first thing I noticed when I got over to Europe was just they treated you like, okay, this is your job. You know, you're a professional musician, and we're going to treat you like one. And in the US, you're basically, unless you're like on that top tier level, they're like, oh, okay, you're just like some kids trying to have fun and play music out of your garage or whatever.
if you're not Metallica, it's you're not respected. Okay, fair enough. So, in terms of, so you're saying you come to the UK and you go into Europe, and you feel you can see the difference in professionalism with sound engineers, light engineers, the crew treating you with a bit more respect. How is that in terms of money, i.e. fees? Does it cost? Do you get paid more in the UK and Europe than you do in your home country?
I mean, it ranges all over the place. Like, I think overall it's basically the same pay. The difference comes with like hospitality, food, places to stay after the shows. So, you know, in Europe, a lot of the times the venue will either have a place for you to stay right there. They have like their own hostel or whatever, or they'll book you one. In the US, you're completely on your own. So that's, you're going to be spending money on that. As far as food, I mean, we showed up every day in Europe and there's like meat and cheese plates, there's vegetables, fruits. I mean, it's awesome. I wasn't used to it at all at first because in the US, you get there and there's nothing. And they're like, oh, yeah, here's some like drink tickets. You can get a couple beers and that's about it. So you're spending money on food too. So, I mean, even though the guarantees are sort of the same, you end up like not having to spend those guarantees on.
Yeah, on the fact you need a bed for the night, or you need to feed yourself. It's strange because I've heard so often about the UK being quite poor in terms of hospitality for bands, and the way we treat bands in comparison to maybe some of the countries in Europe or Central Europe or maybe Japan or whatever. So it's interesting to hear you say that. Well, you'll find that America's one step worse.
No, exactly. I was gonna say I'd put it into like three categories where like US is at the bottom tier for hospitality, places to stay, and like professionalism and stuff. The UK is one step up. Right. But then obviously like mainland Europe is just like at the next top level of it for sure. Yeah.
5-star quality. Okay, so let's talk about the UK for a bit. You've been a band for several years now. Yeah, when did you first arrive here? Was it the Bloodstock show in 2016? And if so, I mean that's a hell of a introduction to the UK scene, playing the main stage at Bloodstock. So tell me a wee bit about that.
Yeah. It was that year that we played Bloodstock, and that was the first year we toured as a band at all. We had come off, we had done one US tour prior to that that was a couple weeks long. I want to say like 2 weeks in the U.S. and then we flew out to Europe, and it was just, man, it was just like surreal and like hard. It was a really fast day. Bloodstock specifically. We played the main stage, but we were the first band on for the day. I think it was the Sunday, so it was like 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And on tour, your schedule is usually you arrive at the venue at like 3-4 p.m. and then you play at night. So like it was completely opposite. So we had to get up super early at like 8 in the morning. So I was just like, I don't know, sort of out of it. I had to like wake myself up. And usually like the way I scream, the super high pitched vocals, just I lose my voice after 2-3 days for about a day or so.
Right.
And then I gain it. It's weird. It's like it calluses itself and then I get it back for the rest of a tour. Right. So I wake up that morning and I'm like, shit, I don't have my voice. So I like get, I'm in the UK, so there's always like tea everywhere. So I'm just like drinking like super hot tea. I'm not talking. I'm like trying to like get my voice to go. Yeah. And we get to the venue and we do our sound check. There's like an open field and I'm like, great, we're going to be playing like this huge festival to nobody.
Yep.
And I was like super worried about that. And so we go backstage after we sound check and the guy comes up. I'm not even sure his name. This was like, the whole thing was like a super big rush because we left right after we played. We didn't even like stay for the festival.
Right, okay.
So he comes back and he's like, do you want me to announce you guys? I'm like, sure. I don't know. So he walks out, he's like, Ghostbath. And then I walk out on stage and like the entire field is just like filled with people. And I was like, oh shit. Like, yeah. I think that was definitely the biggest show I'd played at the time and still one of the biggest I've played. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, the entire show is just adrenaline and like huge rush for me. And then we get off,
No, continue, sorry.
Oh,
continue.
Okay. We get off stage and they're just like, okay, you need to go to the signing tent. So we're like, rush. They just like lead us to the tent. Bunch of people come through. You're like shaking hands. You're like signing autographs for like an hour or whatever it is. And they're like, okay, you got to go do your interviews. So they like march us over to some interview area. Like it's like fenced off. And I just like talked to like 3 or 4 people. Then they're like, oh, you got to go to the Gibson bus for another interview or whatever. I do that. And then they're like, okay, we got to go because we got to be in Belgium or whatever by the next night or whatever it is. Like, okay. And then we left and it was just like, did that just really happen? Like half of it felt like a dream, half of it. And I mean, they gave us like a bottle of Kraken rum in our like trailer, our dressing room trailer or whatever. So I was drinking that the whole time and I was just, I don't know, it was like a giant blur, but it was awesome.
but you really, and was that your debut show in the UK, or had you done a couple of shows in the lead up to Bloodstock?
Oh, that was our debut one. Yeah.
So that was your experience of the UK is walking out to the second biggest metal festival on the main stage.
I guess. And it's like the night before I was watching this Twisted Sister documentary, just about how they like came up. And they were talking about the UK and like how rowdy the crowds would get and like people were like throwing things at them and stuff. And I'd never played the UK, so like, shit, I hope they don't like fucking hate us or something. Start throwing stuff at us. Like
it could be worse. I mean, at 11 a.m., as you said, just no one could show up. I mean, every band would prefer someone throwing someone at them than no one there at all. So when you're talking about you play that set at 11 a.m., I watched the videos back earlier, actually, but just before I was talking to you. It was great to see you. It kind of, there's nothing in more stark contrast than the set you done at Damnation, but we'll get to that. So you play your set at Bloodstock. You're dragged to the signing tent, and you're dragged to the Gibson bus, and then you're dragged. Who was doing that? Did you have someone on the road as a tour manager at the time, or were Bloodstock staff doing it? Who was organising it?
So we did have a tour manager. He sort of got in contact with the team at Nuclear Blast, and they were the ones who like I said, it was a big blur, so I might be getting some of this wrong. But as I remember it, the guys at Nuclear Blast, the UK team, who are really awesome, they were the ones who set up all the interviews and stuff. As far as the signing tent, I don't remember who set that up, because you just get done playing this huge show all of a sudden, and then somebody brought me to a signing tent. I don't know who it was. Right. And you're meeting all the fans. But yeah, I think it was the Nuclear Blast team who got us all the interviews and stuff, and then it was the tour manager who's like hurrying us along and like, okay, we got to go, and like coordinating all of that for us.
Yeah. So, and as I say, that contrast, so you play Bloodstock to however many thousand at 11 a.m. And then 2 years later, you come and play Damnation, not the main stage, the fourth stage, where you guys headline at 11 p.m. maybe, clashing with Napalm Death, unfortunately. But how was that experience for you? In not which one was better, but just in comparison to how you felt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different experience. So like Bloodstock, we were a brand new band. We'd only been playing together for one tour. I'd say we were definitely not as tight, not as confident, for sure. I mean, over years of playing together, you just get way more confident, you get way more tight as a band. But I remember that day I was actually sick, and so we pulled up into like the university or whatever, and I just went to sleep in the bunk bed of our van. Right. For most of it, which I regret, but I wasn't feeling good at all, and I wish I could have checked out more of the festival. Yeah. I remember I woke up at one time and I got out, and like the guys from Batushka were like arguing or something right outside of our van. I'm like, okay.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And then another time, all of a sudden I look out the window and there's just a mass crowd of people. I'm like, what is going on? And I like get out, and one of the guys from Ghostbath, I don't remember who, it's like, oh yeah, like the fire alarm went off. Okay. and it was Mole. And I was like, oh shit. That was a band we were on tour with at the time. Yeah. I just thought it was hilarious that they like set the fire alarm off, because they always had this smoke machine. Yeah. And they would run it for us sometimes when we'd play our set too. But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, I did not expect the room to be packed when we played at Damnation, because I was like, okay, well, we're playing against like the headliner of the entire festival right now. But yeah, I took a picture of it because it was awesome, and it was just front to back people. It was amazing, and I definitely prefer sound indoors, because I like it super loud. I like to feel when I hit my guitar, I just love to feel it hit me back through the monitors and through the amps. And so, I don't know, I just had a great time. I had my full voice, luckily, for that.
Yeah. It was a real good response as well. I mean, sometimes when you're putting together a lineup, we try our best, like, okay, well, maybe grindcore's not your thing, so what maybe shoegaze, black metal would be, or sometimes you get people, it doesn't matter what band you book, they hate the Clash. But with that one, I'm glad it worked, because we've the band Electric Wizard played one year, and in the other stage, Amun Ra were playing, and Amun Ra really suffered, because even fans who were fans of Amun Ra went to see Electric Wizard. So I'm always delighted. One, when a band that opens a stage has a packed room, I think that's really important for Damnation. And secondly, when we do the clashes, that, like yourself, you're playing against Napalm Death or Imperial Triumphant, had to play against Opeth. Getting in and still having that packed venue was fantastic. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that. The rest of the tour, I came to see you guys in Audio in Glasgow. I think it was a couple of days after Damnation. How did you find the rest of the tour, the promoters, the venues, the reception?
Man, I mean, going on tour, especially in Europe, where we get a bottle of whiskey and a fridge full of beer every night, and I'm basically drunk the entire time. And during the day we have a driver, so that's like a luxury for us. Our tour manager drives the van also, and we got a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van, a super nice van to tour in, compared to in the US we just have some broken down 15 passenger like Ford from the 80s or something. So every night you're in a different city and everything begins to like blur together, and you're like, where were we yesterday? Like you don't even, remember. As far as like Glasgow, and I do remember, the main thing I remember from that is after the show, everyone sort of went to a certain bar and everyone was like coming up to me, talking to me, and every single time I could not understand what they were saying. And I was like, how is this? I did not expect like that to be the hardest language barrier of the tour or of anywhere, because everywhere else in Europe I could understand people just fine. Germany, even like Eastern Europe, like Romania, Estonia, it didn't matter where we were. It was perfectly fine. I'm like, okay, I can talk to anyone. It's easy. But in Glasgow, every time somebody came up to me, they'd say something. I'd feel so bad too. And I'd just be like, okay, sorry, you're going to have to say that again. Like, what? and then part of the time I just ended up just nodding and being like, yep.
Yeah, I have been there so many times. I mean, this pace that I'm talking at is difficult for me. It's difficult. And I completely understand when we were chatting about possibly doing this one. In fact, when I was thinking about doing a podcast at all, that was my biggest issue, was this. I've been in situations, I was at Roadburn Festival in Holland, and I needed to get someone from England to order a cheeseburger for me. You know what I mean? It's like, the waiter just could not understand me saying cheeseburger. I'm like, this guy is having a laugh here. But it's true. We have a ridiculously thick accent, and we do get excitable, and we love a drink. So there's a lot of drunk people probably shouting at you, telling you how great or how terrible or fucking whatever your band was that night. But yeah, that's true. So you guys were on tour with Mole, however you pronounce it, and how did that tour go? It seemed to do very well in Glasgow. In the UK, did you just go throughout Europe with those guys?
Yep. We went all through Europe. I think all the shows were pretty good. We were sort of around a similar level band because, Mole had a lot of hype behind them. They had that new album come out. And overall, it was a great tour. I've learned over time, like, we need to sort of figure out like our stage show a little better, because, going overseas, you basically have nothing and you have to like plan it all out. And so Mole were like nice enough they had like sort of some lights, and they had like a fog machine, and their guitarist would like sit back there and sort of hit the lights or like make the fog go out for us, as like they're super nice guys. And the only thing that sucked about that tour was how you said if a band's playing where they're from, you expect like a giant show. And so we played in Copenhagen in Denmark. That's where Mole's from. Yep. Their singer was sick, and they didn't play that show. Like, it's supposed to be like the biggest show. I mean, the show still turned out great, but I imagined it would have been like sold out if they would have showed up too. We were the only band on it. We ended up being the only band on that one. So
I mean, that's great to hear. My experience with Mole is what they were fantastic guys. I mean, when that fire alarm goes off, it cuts two band sets off. It cuts the band set off in the stage you played, and it cut off Cancer on the main stage. And then also, fucking that fire alarms went off the year before also. So some bands can be really difficult about that and want to get back on stage, and rightly so. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but when they want to get back on stage after 20 minutes, it starts to eat into the production of the festival, and then the day becomes difficult. Mole could not have been nicer about the fact that fire alarm had gone off, and I really appreciated that with him. So it's good to also hear that there were a lot of bands would like to blow the other band off the stage. I mean, you hear that on tours, that you want to be the band that goes on there and kills it, and not really a consideration for the band you're touring with. So the idea of the guitarist sitting there with a smoke machine, making sure you guys have got a great set and better lights is absolutely fantastic. So great. Let's talk about your label. This podcast hasn't really isn't really. I don't know much about labels. You guys are with Nuclear Blast, pretty major deal. What does that actually mean in terms of what does that mean for you in terms of an artist?
Oh man, I mean, it's definitely every band's dream to be on like a big label, you know, no matter what the deal is, basically. I mean, everyone always tells me ever since we got signed to Nuclear Blast, like, oh, you're like doing exactly what I want to be doing. Like, I have a ton of musician friends from around here. They put like touring support into our deal, and so that's the only reason we're even like able to come over to Europe in the first place.
Yep.
And that really helped because you got plane tickets, you got to bring your guitars over, you got to pay separately for all the shipping those over, you got rent a tour van, rent a driver, rent a tour manager every day, plus there are some days where you have to book your own hotels or whatever. And so that they really helped us to be able to do that. And like now I think we could do it without that tour support, but it was definitely great to like get us started and like help us sort of build an audience and start doing live shows overseas. Just the name alone, like if somebody says, oh, you're on Nuclear Blast, it automatically gives you that recognition. Like people will just give you a little bit more respect instead of you're just some band like, oh yeah, we just play metal, and say, oh yeah, we're signed to Nuclear Blast, they're automatically going to look at you differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm like all about, I have a degree in psychology, and so I'm all about like the perception of things and how people look at something and how you present something.
Yeah.
And so just getting the label of Nuclear Blast on all of our stuff helped with basically every aspect, like from getting into magazines, getting onto certain festivals, to just getting on tours, like opening slots, getting interviews. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't want to say gatekeeping, but like it's sort of like if you go to a certain publisher for a book that you like their books, you're going to give them a chance that you wouldn't otherwise just on a random author. So like if you know the label, you're going to give that band a chance, and that just opens the doors for so much,
Yeah, there's a weird knock-on effect that we. I'm not involved in it because Damnation's my one thing a year. It's not my job. It's not what I'm involved. So whatever band the label's on, it really makes no difference to me whatsoever. I don't really know much of labels. I don't deal with labels, but I can see the influence it has behind the scene before it gets to me. The fact that you guys will be touted, or you guys might have gone to Bloodstock because of a relationship that you had, or they had when Nuclear Blast, or that kind of thing, and then that's got some sort of validity to it. So then when I know you guys have played the main stage at Bloodstock, so like if they pulled 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people at Bloodstock, they'll fit nicely into Damnation. Then maybe that has a knock-on effect to the next. So it really does have a big say, even if, like myself, you're not really too worried about which label any particular band's on, or you don't have that relationship with that label. But then it comes to your booking agency, you're with Avocado, which is not the opposite, but it's not one of the major. It's no international talent booking. They've got Converge, they've got Parkway Drive, Ministry, they've got some pretty sizable bands, but they have a lot of bands that are much smaller or in the hardcore scene or punk scene. So how did you come about the decision to go with Avocado?
Well, we had a manager at the time, and he was the one it was Mike Mowry at Outer Loop, a US-based management team, and he's the one who introduced me to Marco at Avocado. Yep. And as far, like, at that time, I didn't know, you could have told me like 3 different booking agencies that are like basically nothing, or like one of the major ones, I wouldn't have known the difference at that point in time, because I had no experience with touring in Europe at all. And so I was like, if Mike recommends it, our manager, then it must be pretty good, so let's do it. And I mean, I'm super happy with them. I'm glad to still be with them. They've done nothing but help us out, and They got us on, I mean, our very first time in Europe, they got us on Bloodstock. They got us on a tour with Dying Fetus and Black Dahlia Murder on a show with Converge. I'm like, well, I can't be mad at them for that.
Exactly. I mean, they were responsible, not that the Damnation's like the highlight of your career or anything, but it was Marco that reached out to me and said, do you fancy this package with Mong? And I was like, okay, I'll give both bands a chance and see what's what. And I'm delighted I did, because two fantastic performances, and it was that. But it's is that for the world? Does Marco book you guys in the US as well, or do you have different agents for different regions?
We have a US and Canada agent who's separate, and then Marco is just for Europe and the UK.
Right. Okay.
And recently, actually, we've switched US agents 3 times now. So we had our original agent, and then he ended up quitting booking completely. Like he didn't. And then we switched to another agent that our management recommended. And then we sort of parted ways with management. So I sort of do the management work now.
Okay.
And I'm not exactly sure what happened, but the booking agent said, oh, like, I'm not going to book you anymore. Okay. So we switched to another agent who I had originally talked to, and I've been on tours that he booked, like with Abigail Williams was the last tour we've been on, and Daniel DeFonce at Continental. And so I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I definitely want to work with you guys. So that's who we are with now. So yeah, the US has been sort of switching around a lot, but yeah, in Europe it's been consistently Avocado. Yeah. And as far as like the rest of the world, we haven't been anywhere else yet. Yeah. I really wanted to do like an Australia, Japan, China tour, which obviously now is going to be way more up in the air than it ever was. So, yeah.
What happens in this? I have no idea. So what happens in a situation where someone approaches you from Australia or Japan or anywhere that's not where you're represented? How does that come about, or that's why you don't have shows?
I mean, I'm trying to remember times where somebody from outside of the like US or Europe has approached us, and I think I can only remember like one other time, and it just didn't really go anywhere. Right. I said, here, talk to my agent or whatever, and nothing came of it really. Same with Russia. I've been trying to get over to Russia a few times with and I just had them talk to Marco, but it just ended up not ever happening.
Right.
Yeah. So I do know like friends who like Numenorian, another Black Gaze band, they just got contacted by a festival promoter, and then he was like, I'll take care of your tickets or whatever. And I mean, if somebody did that for us, I'd be on a plane right away, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the cost. I mean, we know that, I know, and you know the fees that are involved with bands at your level. I mean, it's non-comparable to 4 or 5 flights from the US before you even touch down, and then all the other costs that are involved. So to get across there, when you do these tours, there's you mentioned I think you mentioned both Dying Fetus and Decapitated. That's a different vibe from Ghostbath. How did you find those tours, and more importantly, how did the fans find Ghostbath on those tours?
So first of all, like, yeah, I would say like on paper, if you just look at the genre names, or if you just listen to the records, you're going to be like, these bands are nowhere near each other in terms of sound. But almost everywhere I've been, one of the main things people have told me is you guys are way heavier live. And so I think that's like part of the reason why we worked out so well on tours with like a lot of death metal bands and stuff like that. But I've always told my agents, I like being either the heaviest band on like a lighter bill or the lightest band on a heavier bill. And we'll sort of tailor our set on purpose for that. So like, let's say we're playing with Dying Fetus and Black Dahlia Murder, who are both definitely like heavier than us. We will pick songs that are purposely more melodic, more slow, just to like sort of stand out. and I just always like standing out on the bill.
Yeah.
And people, the reception is, I mean, no matter what, if you haven't heard of us, we're going to be super polarizing right away just because of the vocals. But then people will either, I'll look online. Usually people don't come up to me like, oh, you guys were terrible or whatever. But somebody will like post a comment or whatever, like, these guys are like the worst band. How are they on this tour? Or, wow, I discovered my new favorite band today. You know, like they either love us or they hate us. And that's just how we've always been.
I mean, criticism always stings, but there's nothing worse than being dismissed or ignored. You know, it's like you'd much rather there was some sort of impact, even if it's negative, than nothing at all, because that's heartbreaking when no one gives a shit, basically. So it's good.
No, exactly. One of my favorite directors, Harmony Korine, he does a bunch of weird films, but he said any reaction is a good reaction. The only wrong reaction is no reaction. Yeah. And that really stuck with me. And I definitely agree. Like, I'd rather somebody be like, wow, that was like so bad, I hated the vocals, and just anything like a strong visceral reaction to us, I love it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, somebody saying they like hated the vocals or we were the worst band they've ever seen or whatever because of it, that I like just as much as somebody saying, you know, I loved you guys, you're so good or whatever.
Right. Okay. I wasn't going to mention the vocals because, much like the whole China thing, I don't really care. In the sense that I don't know what 90% of black metal and death metal and grindcore guys are singing about. So whether there's actual lyrics there or not, it's one of these things you're almost pretending to yourself that you give a shit. So why do you think there's such a reaction to the fact that there's no lyrics to what you're doing?
I think that's just sort of the natural reaction. It's like I mentioned Silencer like right away, and they're a depressive, suicidal black metal band, which is a strong influence in what we do. And my very first reaction to them was to laugh and like think it was ridiculous and silly. And I would show people it just to be like, look how crazy this sounds. Like, it doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. And then over time, I just basically slowly, unironically started to enjoy it. And so I just started, you know, delving deeper into it. It's like the initial impact is so big because it's just so different. And yeah, there's no lyrics. And the only other band I remember having no lyrics sort of like that was Sigur Rós from Iceland. They sort of make up their own language. So I kind of took a little influence from that too. I was like, okay, I can just do whatever feels right in the moment to the music. And that was always my thing, is to just, you know, pure emotion when I put into both the vocals and the guitar playing and the writing, stuff like that. I remember the drummer from Dying Fetus, so this like connects these two things. So he said, how do you fit on a bill with these heavy bands, and then how do people react to the vocals? Well, he had an interview right after our tour with Gear Gods. It's like a YouTube channel. And he was asked, what is the most extreme band that you've played with? And he said, definitely Ghostbath. So apparently to Dying Fetus, we're the most extreme band they played with. I thought that was interesting.
That says a lot about, because if you go on a tour and you are Decapitated and Dying Fetus and Suffocation and on and on and on, that all these bands, as great as they are, they're all heavy. And if that is your day, and these guys, some of the tours that go through America that we don't get in the UK are like, and I forget the name of them, but like 8 bands deep, and they're all that brutal death metal. Just hearing Ghostbath, I can see why you would think it's something, because you must get numb. You must get numb to that style of music, whether it be pig squeals or just that brutal death metal. I can see why he'd think that. So what's next? What's next for you guys? You're in this weird situation. I've spoke to a few bands now in a weird situation. An album recorded, and what's happening with that? Does it have a name yet?
Yeah. So we've been working on this album for like a year now. And at first we were like, okay, we're going to get this done in spring, release it summer or fall, and then go on tour. That was the initial plan. And obviously that's not going to happen. And so we just decided, okay, we're going to take our time in recording this. We don't need to rush it. We're tracking in a studio in Minneapolis, so we can just book a couple days whenever. Like this weekend, I'm actually going up there. We're not completely done with it, and I'm going to be recording more vocals, piano, all that kind of stuff. And so right now our idea is just, take our time with it. When we're done tracking, we'll get it mixed, mastered, and then we'll just kind of sit on it until we sort of see what's going on in the world. And it's hard to say. Everything's up in the air. I'm not going to like plan anything right now. But I think our general idea is if by next fall there's no change, there's no touring, whatever, we'll just put it out. Because we're not going to sit on it forever.
Of course. So I take it the feeling is, because obviously some bands, I mean, I know Nathrak, who I spoke to, they're putting out their Endocument album, is your view is you just don't want to do it. You want to be able to go and support it afterwards, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we haven't put an album out since April of 2017. So it's been over 3 years now. And so we've been working hard on this one. And I feel like it would just be sort of a waste to put it out right now, in my opinion.
That was a good dodge of answering if it has a name or not. Does the new album? I mean, I'm actually a journalist as well, so I know when a question's been dodged. So, does it have a name? Or if you don't want to say the name, that's fine as well. But I still need the question answered.
Okay. Well, I'm the sort of like large picture vision person, and I've had these 3 albums, Star Mourner, Moonlover, and this new one planned out for years and years. Yeah. And so we have a name, we have a cover, we had the vibe of it and the general idea of the songs for like years before we even started the album. So yeah, we have all that, but I'm not giving any of it out because I have no idea when it's coming out or anything. So
good. I say good, as long as that's answered. Now I've again, this podcast, it's not really about the whole generic sort of what does it sound like. However, I have you here, so what can fans expect from this new album whenever it does drop? Is it more of the same? Or are you going to is it going to be a weird change in direction?
Let's see. Let's pick one thing to talk about it. It has lyrics. That's like the biggest difference there. So nothing before this has had lyrics. So yeah, I'd say, let's just talk about the vocals. On this album, I have a way wider range of what I'm doing vocal wise. So I'll do, we still have the high pitched Ghostbath screams, but I also have a lot more sort of mid range, black metal. And then I also have, we must have been influenced by Dying Fetus or something, because I do a lot of low, like guttural stuff too. Right, which we've never done before. So.
And what about the vocals? What was your change in mind for that? You fancied it, or did something happen that you thought, right, this is going to add to the next album?
I never want to like make the same album twice, and so this one was always supposed to be the heaviest album out of the 3, and so it just made sense for me to sort of add, a lower vocal tones just to add to that heaviness and the overall vision of the album. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Listen, I'm not going to press you too much. I can see you want to have this a package ready to go for nuclear blast when it's ready. So I'm not going to grill you too much now. So, but I'm right in thinking this is the first album you've recorded as a band, not as Dennis. The first 2 were you, and then you took out musicians to play with you live. Is that the same artist that you've now got in the band recording?
Yeah. Yep. So they're the same band that I've been playing with live. This is the first album where I didn't write every single part. Okay. So, the EP, Funeral, Moonlover, Star Mourner, I wrote the drums, bass, guitar, piano, vocals. It was all me. On the last album, Star Mourner, they did perform on it, but they didn't write the parts. So it's kind of like a little transition period. Yeah. And this is the first one. I think the only way to move forward basically as a band and like evolve our sound was to get some other input on the writing, because I've basically said everything I want to say as far as me writing the entire thing and having control over everything.
Yeah.
And now that I trust these guys and I like what they bring to the table, I think it just made sense if we wanted to move forward with our sound to have everyone have an input on this album.
Yeah. Was that difficult when it's your baby? It's literally you've given birth to these first 3 records, and then now was there challenges and you having to give up a bit of control?
Not as bad as I thought it would. I was a little bit worried about that, but just the different aspects of sound that they brought in. It's sort of like you don't know what you like or what you want until you hear it. Like you don't, so you're kind of like pleasantly surprised by something. So somebody will bring, more of a death metal riff, or especially one of the big differences, a lot of the rhythms and the time signatures. I'm very minimalistic 4/4 time, switching chords at just normal rhythms. And these guys, they write in a totally different style. And so they're able to bring, different rhythmic stuff and different like heavier chugging riffs that I just don't normally write. And then I can go on top of that and bring my normal, melodic and like pretty and beautiful chord changes or melody to it. And those put together, I think, just make something really cool that I wouldn't have been able to make on my own.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. As I say, I take a lot of advice, not advice, but collaboration with some of the lineups at Damnation. I take a lot of trust in the agents that I know, the people, friends that I've got. I've got a WhatsApp group. If there's a black, I didn't know an awful lot about the band Mork, the black metal band from Europe, and I've got a WhatsApp chat. I can go, are Mork legit or the shit? So I can see why things can come out a lot better if you put your trust in folks. So I'm glad that that's the case. Okay, let's end on a high note. Let's say your good President Donald Trump's right and it just disappears. And what would you like 2021 to look like, and what events would you like to play?
I mean, we've never been super picky, but I would play like, I want to return to Bloodstock. I think we did really well there. And every time we come to the UK, people are always like, I saw you at Bloodstock, you're awesome. I saw you at Bloodstock, you're awesome. And I heard like after our set, of course we left, everyone was doing the Ghostbath scream for the rest of the festival. So that's really cool. I think we made an impact there. So I think it makes sense for us to play there again. Yeah. But I don't know. I like a mixture of, headlining and supporting bigger bands. I'd love to play with like some bigger black metal bands. I think we've mostly played with a lot of death metal, as we've been talking about. It'd be cool to play with some more of a black metal crowd.
Such as who in the black metal scene would you like to play with?
Anyone really. I don't know. I'm not picky at all. Like it's a
Emperor. You want to go on a full tour with
Yeah, I'll play with Emperor. I'll play with like anyone from Behemoth, who's like huge, to there's this black metal band or depressive black metal band from Georgia, the country Georgia, called Psychonaut 4, who are like smaller, but they're really big in like the depressive black metal scene. So I've been trying to get something with them. Nocturnal, Depression, they're great. I really want to tour with a lot of the bands who are bigger, just in the DSBM scene. So like Nocturnal, Depression, Germ, Austerities.
Where do I don't know a lot about different scenes. I promote very much in a top level. I don't dive too deep into labels that people are on or the scenes they're in or what they're involved in. But where does the band like the Swedish Shining, they always stood out as the sort of poster boys of fucking suicidal black metal, because he was such a spokesman for cutting yourself, and I promoted them once and they kind of came across that way to me, where you're a ray of sunshine in comparison to that guy. So is that another band? In fact, there's a poster behind me, the Watain and the Shining show that I've done. Is that another band that you can, you're mentioning a lot of bands that I genuinely just don't know the names of. So is that another band you quite like to tour with, or are they too big in that suicidal black metal scene?
Oh, Shining would be great. I'd do that.
Yeah.
I do them. I saw like Forgotten Tomb. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a little bit bigger, and they have like, you know, the depressive aspect. That'd be cool. Watain would be cool too. I heard a lot of stories about their antics with like blood and stuff backstage and dead animals. So
yeah,
I'm into all that. I would love to do that.
I need to pack in 2 guitars and dead rats to I'm heading to Europe. Fantastic. Right, listen, that was great. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you trying to tackle my accent. I've noticed you a few times trying to watch my lips to see what I'm saying.
Yep.
Listen, but you've done a great job, mate. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
No, just if you have a chance to tour Europe and you're in a US band, definitely do it. It's worth it. It's worth the experience, and even though it seems like it costs a lot up front, you're going to be taken care of. So I would say it's a lot less scary once you're there. The biggest part is to, you know, plan it out, buy the tickets, and actually take that leap to do it, you know.
Yeah, and then you come across. Well, I'm glad to hear that Europe's so welcoming and professional. And likewise, if you can use your platform to help me crack America, then we can take the Glasgow accent. We can take the Glasgow accent to the masses. All right. Thank you very much, Dennis. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.